missionary this morning is Pastor Ben Platts. I've known Ben since he was 13 years old. He came to our youth group at Kingston Alliance Church, and his mom and dad volunteered as well. Ben is married to Krista, and they have 2 children. They've known the Pinroses for about 15 years, and he leads a ministry here called Nightlight, and I think he's going to share a little more about that. Ben was also a very good hockey player, and his claim to fame is he got to play with me, but that's not it. He played junior hockey, and he did very well. But the biggest claim to fame for Ben is that I did his wedding. I did the photography. The very first one I ever did, and they were very gracious. And I know you'll find that out very, very shortly. Ben, come and share what God has laid in your heart.
Thanks, Ralph. Yeah, nice surprise coming in this morning and seeing Ralph. I haven't seen him, as often as you'd like. Even though you live in the same town as people, you don't always get to see people. Is that true for you as well? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, my name is Ben. Serve as a missionary with SIM along with the Piano Roses. We've known the Piano Roses before we knew SIM, each of us. And I don't know if it's true or not to say that they joined SIM because my wife and I were a part of SIM or not, or if they had another route to it, but we're thrilled that they have done that because that means that when we do SIM Canada events and they're back in the country, we have another occasion to hang out with them. Last chance I had to, I don't think Dennis was there that day, but at Grass Creek Park, Sarah and I remember we sat for about an hour supervising a bunch of kids, her kids, my kids, and some others, swimming in the lake there, and had some really nice conversations before they were heading out to North Africa. So we've known them for quite a while, and when they get to come back, we get to see them and catch up with them. And then I often will hear Sarah's voice talking with my wife, over WhatsApp, from time to time. And so I get updates more from my wife about what's going on in their world because she and Sarah are very good friends, and so that's really a really great thing. The reason I'm here today and they're not is that I think that they were hoping to be back in Canada this summer at this time. Is that true? Okay. And I wasn't sure, and so through one event, I guess, led to another, is, I think, Fenton, you contacted the SIM office or something, and they said, can you send somebody else, right? And so I live 10 minutes down the road, so not so far away, and so they reached out to me to say, can you come and speak? And so I said, I would be honored to come and, shine a light on the Piano Roses, what they're doing, and reminding us, that, we need to keep them in our prayers, we need to help, send finances, send encouragement, because as Sarah was talking about, this part of the world that they're in can be a very, very dark place, right? And the Holy Spirit, as I've learned in my studies, one of his primary roles is to encourage us, is to help us to kind of, carry on, to have some resolve, to keep moving forward. But of course, the darker the place you are, the more encouragement kind of fuel that we need, right? And right now we live in a place where fuel is expensive, right? Encouragement's expensive too, right? It's not that it's expensive for us to give, but to take the time and take the effort to try to, extend it and give it and kind of remind people that what we're doing, what we're all doing, is for a greater purpose. It's for God's kingdom and building that around the world. So I'm so glad the kids are in the service today. In fact, if I had my choice, I would have said, give the Sunday school teachers a break. I love having kids with us. So kids, I'm going to really need your help today to help remind us. Sabbath, so Sunday they kind of sometimes talk about the Sabbath. You know what the Sabbath is about? Have you heard the word Sabbath? Yeah, what does it mean? Sometimes we use these kind of funny, fancy words, but we're not always sure what they mean. What do you think it means?
It's a day of rest.
It's a day of rest, yeah. And what are you supposed to do on the day of rest? Are you supposed to just lay in bed? Because we're not laying in bed if we got that wrong.
No.
What do you do on the Sabbath? You rest, and what are you doing?
And you praise God.
You praise God, yeah. You come, gather together into church, right? What about anybody else? Anyway, adults too, don't have to be just the kids. Sabbath. We've used the word, a lot growing up. I'm assuming lots of us have been in the church for at least a few years. Maybe some of us, like me, has been our entire lives. do you think Sabbath, does that have to do with remembering? Okay, not sure. Okay, well let me help you. Right? Sabbath is a day to remember. Right? So God says, remember the Sabbath. Right? Well, what are we supposed to do on the Sabbath? Right? Well, it's a one day a week that we set aside to remember. But what are we supposed to remember? To remember. Well, remember, we're supposed to remember where God has brought us out, right? Our church lineage links back all the way into Genesis, where God was bringing, into Exodus was bringing us out of the desert, right? That's all part of our story as well. And so we can sometimes forget. In fact, the Old Testament, I think, is kind of like a whole bunch of books about people forgetting where they've come from, who God is, and turning their attention on other things as a way of moving forward or trying to find security. Would you agree with some of that? Okay, I could see some reserved nods. Nobody's going to commit too wholeheartedly here. That's okay. Well, let me ask you another related kind of question. We talk about mission, right? What does the word mission, or the root word missio, does anybody know what that means? Send, right? So it's the Greek word for send. So when we're talking about mission, we're talking about sending, right? Or being sent, or being involved in sending others. So let me ask you, how important is it to God and who He is that, and the idea of sending? Would you say it's moderately important? It's really important? Maybe I'm confused about, the relationship between the two? What do you think? Is it an important idea? Yeah, it's an important idea, right? In fact, we'd say that, the nature of God is a sending God, isn't He? Who did He send to us?
Son.
He sent His Son, right? So what's the most famous verse probably that we know? John 3:16. Does it have anything to do with sending in that verse? God so loved the world that He sent His Son, right? We talk about it, many people, even people who are not yet Christians, might know John 3:16. It may have kind of seeped into the popular culture, right? So sending is really important. Now, is it just the piano roses that He's talking about there? Like He sends His Son, He sends the piano roses. What about us? What's our relationship to that? Do we have a role in that?
Yes.
We do, right? In fact, is it just that He sends them, but that means the rest of us can kind of stay in Kingston and do nothing or just do something different? No, right? In fact, I would say that we are, as Christians, another way to think of us is we are sent senders, kind of hyphenated. Sent senders, right? We have been sent in order to send. So what in the early days in the church, they would call this the ecclesia, the assembly, right? He has assembled us here together for what purpose? So that we could come together and then He'll disperse us, right? So do we kind of just stay here and huddle up in our fortress and just wait that Jesus come back, this afternoon, right? No, we go out into the world and we are lights, salts in our places of employment in school. Did anybody start school this week? Either homeschooled or, right? Okay? So you are sent, right, into your school to be salt and light, to be people who are going to make a difference, right? Okay? So we are all senders. I don't know, have you ever thought of it that way before? Right? So we've been sent with the purpose of helping to send. So sometimes you've got vocational missionaries like the Piano Roses or ourselves, right? Sometimes you have, people who are called, who are sent, into the workforce, into the military, into Queen's University, all kinds of places to do all kinds of things. But all of us are on a common mission, right? We are all sent. And in fact, anything that we could say about God and Jesus, right, we can't say with kind of separating the sentness of Him, right? Jesus sent us, right? And then sometimes we say, what did Jesus do when He was at the end of His earthly mission? Did He kind of, say, oh, retirement, I can put my feet up, I can move to Kingston, retirement capital of Canada, right? And I don't have to do anything anymore, I did my part, right? He then, who did He send? He sent the Holy Spirit. He sent His disciples. Right? So the ongoing mission of God is sending, right? It's gathering, ecclesia, in the church. That's why we're here today. We're gathered together to remember that our job is to send, right? And that we've been sent. And that we're going to be going out into the world to do light and salt mission kind of work. That make sense? Basic kind of thing. Ralph mentioned that I work with a mission called Nightlight. Just show of hands, has anybody heard of Nightlight before? Okay, so there's maybe half, maybe a little bit less than half. So Nightlight is a ministry that my wife and I started, like 16, 17 years ago in Guelph, downtown Guelph. It reaches out to poor people. Why are people sometimes poor? Kids? What causes? I mean, just a factor. You know the answer. What do you think?
They don't have a job.
They don't have a job. Okay, why else might somebody be poor?
They spend way too much money.
They spend their money inappropriately, right? It's amazing how we know that. Yeah, okay. What else?
They might be challenged
They might be challenged. In what way?
physically.
Physically, you might have a physical challenge, right? You may have something that kind of, holds you back from being able to participate or work a job or do something that you otherwise need to do. What else might be a reason why you might be poor? Anyone? Everybody knows the answer to this. What else?
Addiction.
Addiction is a big one, right? Okay. Why do people become addicted? What might be a reason, right? I mean, could be any reason, but what might be a reason somebody might become addicted? And what does addicted mean first? You guys know? Addicted means, yeah?
When you're hooked on, drugs, I guess.
Yeah, so you could be addicted to drugs, right? So you might start using drugs and not be addicted, but you might develop that where you need to have this. Right. So you might have that, right? Why, when I was a kid, I had bad allergies. We're kind of in allergy season again. Anybody have any allergies? You know what I mean, okay? And I used to take a little pill, just a prescription, not even a prescription, just go to Shoppers Drug Mart, grab a pill, and I'd take this thing and it would dry me out. In fact, I would feel so dry, I'd feel like I have to drink water because I felt so dry, right? And it would work to help that. And then one day I would take that same pill and I realized, I'm not dried out and I'm still sneezing. And so we talked to our family doctor and I had to go and get a prescription for an allergy pill, right? So the over-the-counter stuff didn't work anymore. Now I need a harder drug, right? A more potent drug. And eventually that one stopped working, and so then I had to kind of, begin to get, like needles to get, you know what I mean? So sometimes drugs, we take medicine to help us feel differently than what we do feel, right? And so a lot of people drink or do drugs, become addicted to things because they've got a lot of pain that are going on in their lives. That makes sense? Right? And sometimes that's pain because of choices that they've made. But I'll say is I've probably met like 10,000 what you would call poor people in the last 16 years. And I would say that if there's one or two that are in the situation that they're in today because of just choices that they made of their own accord, I would say, I would challenge that stat. I would say that most people are poor because of the environment they grew up in, because of circumstances that were beyond their control. Oftentimes you can identify, you listen to stories like over a coffee with people, and you can hear, right, when I was 7 years old, this happened. When I was in my house at 3 years old, this is what was going on, right? And so oftentimes people are born into an environment that they cannot overcome. And so sometimes they'll turn to drugs or they'll turn to alcohol to kind of deal with that. And does that help in the long term? No, it's not a good solution, right? But it is a solution, at least in the short term. It does numb the pain. So Kingston is Canada's first capital. Does everybody know that? Yeah, we're proud of that as Canadians, as Kingstonians, aren't we? Did you also know that Kingston is the crystal meth capital of Canada? You know what crystal meth is? It's kind of like a drug that you can kind of brew up, and it kind of helps you with people use it a lot to kind of numb their pain. So sometimes you'll see people, we'll have people that come into our centers and they'll be on this drug, and what it causes them to do is not sleep for like 72 hours, like 3 days in a row. So they're really like hyper and they're really kind of like this. But after the 3 days, they really crash hard, and then they have a really big problem afterwards. But anyway, I've just yet to see on our advertisements for Kingston, come to Kingston, right? Come visit the crystal meth capital of Canada. Right? Well, we don't advertise that because we're not very proud of that, but it's true. Right? So in places like Kingston, we have centers in Belleville, we've got centers in Cambridge, and now just a new one we just started about 6 months ago in Sarnia as well. And so we're trying to help people out, and we're recruiting people, Christians, like ourselves, to come and in an environment, just like Tim Hortons. I was at Tim Hortons. Anybody not been to Tim Hortons or like a McDonald's or Starbucks? Okay, I'm on a quest to find, you've never been to a Tim Hortons? You have been. Okay, I was going to say, I've never met anybody who's been in Canada for at least a few months that's never been to one of these places. But our centers kind of feel like those places where you come in, instead of paying $8 for a coffee at Starbucks or $3 at Tim Hortons, our stuff's free, but the goal is to try to begin to build relationship and understand what's going on with people. The numbers of people that have been bullied, is there bullying that goes on in your school or where you are? Have you seen bullying happen?
I think so.
Yeah, where somebody, one kid's picking on another kid or not being very nice. I would say of the 10,000 people that I talk to as well that are poor, I would say I don't even have to ask anymore. I can kind of just probe for it, but I can hear in their story that they were badly bullied. So bullying is a big, big problem. If you see bullying at your school or you see it anywhere, it really is something. If we can stop that kind of thing, it's immensely helpful to not have to have people who are then living under our streets or sleeping under on our sidewalks or doing whatever people do, right? But bullying is a big factor. So kids, we got to stop bullying, okay? And if you're part of bullying, right, then you got to stop that. If you see it happening, you got to speak up and talk to somebody. Okay. Anyway, it's not about me today about this, but I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about who we are, what we do. What I wanted to do, though, in speaking today, is I see you all have Bibles on your chairs. So before you crack it open here, you're never, and I hope nobody gets upset when and I don't know if you ever heard a minister say this or not, I don't want you to open your Bible. Now trust me on it, I see the eyes, okay? It's not because this thing isn't, cool. But what we're going to do is something that Christians before Bibles were widely printed would do, before people were literate, where they could read their own stuff. What they would do is they would gather together, because the church has been gathering together for a couple thousand years, right? And what they would do is they would collectively remember what Jesus has said or what God has said to us, and we would come together and we would piece the stories together and we would talk about what that means and we would have application to it. So rather than just reading it and seeing what it's there, I'm going to wager today that this room collectively can remember, and I came prepared, so I'll help you remember too if you don't remember little details. But I'm hoping, especially the kids, and that's why I was excited that the kids were here today, because kids' memories can sometimes be a little sharper than us older people. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, we agree on that point, okay? When I leave here, permission is again granted to open this back up. But for now, let's just see if we can't remember. Okay, again, another exercise for this time. Let's just see if we can't remember one particular story and see if we can't kind of, piece together the essential details of it and see if there's not something that we can take away. Okay, and I'm going to be asking you for your application. What do you think this means for us today? You guys know each other better. You guys know the context you're in. You guys know what's going on more in your lives. Maybe there's an application or two that you guys can come up with. Okay, and I might have one or two to offer as well, and we can maybe walk away with a few this is the difference that this maybe can make in our lives, and as we're salt and light going out, can make in the lives of others as well. Okay, fair enough? Okay, so the passage today, or there's three passages, it's all found in 3 of the 4 Gospels, but I'm only going to give a little hint to it. Okay, it has to do with a demon-possessed man or 2 demon-possessed men, depending on which version you read, okay? There's one that's in Mark, there's one that's in Luke, and there's one that's in Matthew, okay? Anybody, just by shaking heads, do you kind of know what I'm talking about? Okay, it's familiar? Okay. So it doesn't matter the order of it, but what detail can you remember? Maybe we'll start with the kids. Is there anything about that story? Yes, ma'am.
Jesus took out the demon and put them in the pigs.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the part that people remember. Now, I should say, you know what Bible scholars are? They're people who study the Bible kind of for a living. This is what they do 40 hours a week. When your mom and dad or others are gone, and selling something or fixing something, what they're doing is they're kind of, doing scholarship. They're reading. A lot of these scholars say that this passage, this story in the Bible might be the most strange story in all of the Bible. Okay, so we're going to talk about the most strange story that shows up in all the Bible, and it has to do with pigs, it has to do with demons, and it has to be with them, what did you say, casting them out into the pigs? Yeah, good memory. Okay, who else has a detail? Is this triggering memories now more for more people?
he wanted to be, I don't know if it was one or two, but anyways, he wanted to follow Jesus, and Jesus said, no, you go home and tell what happened to you.
That's right. So in the Matthew story, there's two men, right? In the Luke and the Mark version, there's one man. But all of them, depending on how you read the story, they all after the fact come and say, hey, Jesus, can I get back in the boat? Because he's come across the sea, right? He's calmed the storm. And all of them have that story leading into this story, right? They all say, can we come? All the versions come and say, we want to come with you. And he says what?
Go back home.
Yeah, he says, no, you don't need to be in the boat with me. You need to go back, right? So does he send? Right? He sends, right? If we listen in the Bible, right? If we kind of, put on glasses that are like sending glasses, right? We might see a lot more than we are used to or think of how many occasions Jesus is sending people to go and do something else. No, your mission's not with me in the boat right now. It's, your town needs a witness, right? Your town needs to know about me. It needs to know about what I'm doing, right? Go and do that. Okay? That's a great detail. Kids, any other details? You know something, I can tell. Okay, what is it?
The owner of the pigs were very angry.
The owner of the pigs were very angry. That's true. Okay, why do you think the owners of the pigs would have been angry? Besides you.
Because when the demons went into the pigs, they rushed them into the water. And drowned
Yeah,
them.
so the demons come out of the man or men, right? They go into the pigs, and the pigs decide, hey, let's go for a swim, right? And they jump over a cliff. It's a little maybe too high. Regardless, they all what?
Drowned.
They all drown, right? And the owner is saying, excuse me, right? That cost a little bit of money here. Right. Okay. Interesting detail. What else do you know about the story? Not just kids, but especially kids. Maybe this is a new story for you and you don't know. That's okay too. That's why we're doing it together. It's a win. It's a pass-fail. Either we did it or we don't. Yeah, what else do you know?
There were many demons inside there.
There were many demons. Right. Right? It wasn't a singular. Do you remember, what does the demon say their name is?
Jinn.
Legion. Right? That's correct. Okay? So these two demon-possessed men, I'm going with the Matthew version, these two demon-possessed men, right, have many demons, right? And what's a demon? Do we know what a demon is, guys? Not, we'll call it like Halloween spooky stuff. But what's a...
A demon is Satan's version of an angel.
That's a great...
When Satan was
Yes.
kicked out of heaven, he brought some angels with him.
Yeah.
And then, Satan started as an angel, God's highest angel.
Yeah.
And then he worked his way down to
Yeah.
what it was. And then demons or angels who were with him, when he went out of heaven, was kept out of heaven, became demons.
Right on. Got it, right? And what does angel mean? Do we know what that, when we're talking about angel, do you know what an angel is? Guy with a halo and wings.
Someone who's gone to heaven and has been good and
Okay.
is like,
Yeah, so sometimes we talk about when we go, we become an angel. Yeah, what else? Somebody else is going to say something. Yeah?
A servant of the Lord.
A servant of the Lord, yeah. Sometimes as a messenger, right? So God will often, what does he do with angels? Sends angels, right? With a message, right? To say something, right? So demons we might think of as fallen angels, as fallen messengers of Satan, right? With a message to do something, right? And to, not to encourage or inspire or draw people closer to God, right? But to push them away, to discourage, to do all those things, right? So either we are participating with the angels in sending and participating in the messaging of God, helping people be encouraged, get what they need, or participating with the demons, discouraging people, cutting people down, helping them, live a poorer, rougher life, right? We can sometimes be agents of that. What else about the story do you know? Anybody? But I knew the kids would know this story. I knew that they would have some details about it. Anything else? And you can take a guess and you can say it can be wrong, and that's okay. We're not about right or wrong here. It's just about, let's try to remember here. Yes, ma'am.
The demon-possessed man used to cut himself up and throw himself into the fire and different things to
Yeah,
himself.
he was hurting himself a lot, right? They kind of record that. They take time to record that part, right? They were cutting with stones. They were kind of, hurting. Why do you think people were doing that? We were talking a little bit about poverty before, right? You know, maybe there's a relationship there. What happens when we're not, you know, when things aren't going right for us? Do we tend to just, you know, resolve and kind of get on with things? Or sometimes we can hurt ourselves, right? You know, we can drink, you know, we can eat too much, we can shop too much, we can renovate something that doesn't need renovating, right? Adults, you know what I'm talking about, right? We can chase after things and fill that kind of lonely or hurt void that we have by doing something that is not necessarily, sometimes we think of it as being bad, but sometimes we think of it as being good and healthy, but in fact it is bad, right? So these guys were not just demon-possessed, but they were being tortured. They were miserable by what was going on. Yeah, we got the great details here. What else about the story? And the passage is like only this long, but we're only about halfway there. What else about the story do you remember?
People hurt themselves sometimes because it's the only thing they can control in their lives, or the only time that they can feel.
Sometimes, you know, if you're feeling depressed, you know, sometimes hurting or doing something that's destructive can make you feel something when you otherwise don't feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what should our response to that be? Anger and like, don't do that kind of thing? Or maybe like a compassionate, you know, like, why, right? And if we ask people why, people usually know to some degree why that is, right? And we can kind of, you know, help people with that. We all know people who are, maybe ourselves as well, are doing things that are harming ourselves, right? Yeah. What else?
Yeah, adding on, I think another reason people like hurt themselves is because they want to match their physical pain with their mental pain.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's deep. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. What else do we know about the story? I know that you guys know. You just know that sometimes we kind of just pull it out a bit. Ralph, I know you know something about this story. You know a lot about the story.
Did the possessed man
Yeah.
first push Jesus away?
Did he first push Jesus away?
Was that a demon within speaking to Jesus?
Yeah.
Usually they do. They told, go away, Jesus. We know who you are.
Yeah, he does say that, right? He says, hold on, what are you doing here? Like, you know, like I know what time it is. I know the calendar. I checked it this morning when I woke up. You know, it's too soon. We're not, you know, like your calendar and my calendar are not matching up here. You know, you shouldn't be here, right? You know, we have agreed upon time they talk about, right? And this is not the agreed upon time, right? But then he kind of concedes and says, but if it is the time, right, don't just cast us into the abyss, I think Luke says, right? Don't just cast us into hell. Don't just cast us away, right? Put us into the pigs, right, as we talked about later, right? So he's kind of, you know, so they're challenging. And do they know who this guy is? Right? Jesus, you know, like son of God, you know, why have you come here before the appointed time, right? They know, right? Does anybody else around him know? They're not sure yet, right? They think he's a prophet. They think he's a really interesting rabbi. He's the kind of guy who's not like other rabbis, right? But he's kind of rabbi-ish. And so they're kind of, you know, interested, they're intrigued, right? He's doing something that's attracting crowds, okay? But the demons know. Like there's no doubt in their mind. They know who they're talking to, right? The rest of us don't know yet in the story, okay? But that's right, yeah, so that's good. What else do you know? Yeah?
Didn't Jesus take a coin out of the fish and pay for the pigs, or is that a different story?
That's a different story.
That's a different story, but that's an excellent example of being brave and saying, what about this, right? But that's right, okay? We can kind of collectively remember. And that's what we would do, right, before we were literate. You know, we kind of say, I think that's great. Anything else? Or are we out?
I think they knew the authority Jesus had over them.
Yeah.
They said, you know, why are you here? Cast us in, so they knew
Yeah.
that he had the authority.
Yeah. Yeah, they had no doubt, right? They know that, you know, whatever this guy is going to say and do, like, might as well not fight it because it's going to happen, right? We're not of equal accord here. We're not going to kind of try to resist here, right? The demon-possessed men, yeah, you know, we can have our way with these guys because they aren't as kind of sure as the others. Yeah.
I can't remember, but did his disciples have any comment at that time?
Yeah, they don't kind of say in the passages, the different gospel writers are accounting it, but they're not kind of, they're not major characters in having a speaking role. In fact, there isn't a lot of conversation that's going on in this passage, right? So if you had the red letter Bibles, in fact, I'll give you a hint. There's only one red word in the red. Do you know what I mean by the red letter Bible?
Yes.
Right? So sometimes you get a Bible and they've done, they've highlighted when Jesus speaks, they put it in red. Well, in this passage here, you would only have one word in red in the whole story. So there's not a lot of conversation. It's kind of like this happened and this happened, this is what these people thought, this is what these people did. Do you know what that one red letter would have been? Yeah.
Did Jesus told him to go home?
Yeah, so he says, right, to the pigs when he casts out, he says, go, right? G-O, with an exclamation mark, right? Enthusiasm. Go. Interesting, hey? Well, let me offer one more point, and this is the part that sometimes we overlook. When Jesus came across the river, the lake, right? He was kind of trying to flee and get away from the crowds. There's a big storm that comes up. They land on the other side. Here in Kingston, we've got Highway 15, we've got Highway 2, we've got the 401. There's lots of routes. There's lots of ways to kind of get different places. But in this place, in this part of the world, when you came across the ocean, like there's one road here. It doesn't go this way or this way or this way, right? It's one road that goes from here to there. And the story talks about that these demon-possessed men were so violent, so concerning that they were blocking the road, right? What do you think inflation was looking like down the road? Pretty high inflation, right? Like maybe inflation, and inflation means that, it's hard to get things, and so people are competing to try to buy things, and so the people who are selling them are spending, putting the money up higher, right? That this wasn't probably just for like a week that this was happening. This could have been for like months. This could have been for years that this was happening, right? The economic strife that these two men were likely putting on the communities on the other side of the road was probably pretty high. This was a big problem. This was a social justice and economic, you name it, like whatever, this is a healthcare issue. If you got to ambulance people out, and get them across the sea to the bigger hospitals, like it's blocked, right? There isn't anywhere else to go. And these demon-possessed men are causing a big problem for the region. That's probably lost on us because the story doesn't kind of, go into that kind of detail. But just imagine how big a problem this was, right? And then multiply it by 20 in your head. Okay? It's a big, big problem. Jesus does his thing. Has this conversation with with Legion, with these men, right? Tells them to go. And then what happens? The pigs jump over the thing. The owners are outraged, like my pigs, where they've gone. Or they're relieved to say, well, it's 30 pigs or 300 or 3 or whatever it was, right? But now the economic route is opened up, right? This is good, right? A few pigs lost. Maybe that's not so bad for what's the positives here, right? They all go and tell people in the village, right? Remember that part? They go and tell the people in the village what's happened, right? And then, kids, what happens? They all come back out, and what do they say to Jesus?
Need us.
No, they don't say thank you, thank you. They don't say, who are you? They don't worship, right? They don't start a church and gather together saying, let's plant a church on the place. And when we've seen the Son of God do a miraculous thing, what do? Yeah.
They kicked him out of their town.
They kicked him out, okay?
Yeah.
What? Isn't that the strangest response? No?
People still do that today.
They still do that today, right? That's what we do to Jesus, right? He does something good for us and we say, we can't handle it. Let's get out, please leave. Okay? Strange thing. What maybe is more strange here, and kids, I want you to remember this, okay? But there's a little code that may help us crack the case of what was maybe the reason why these people actually kicked him out. It's called 11Q11. Okay? So I told you, email offended. 11Q11. Anybody know what the code 11Q11 means? No, you don't. Okay. Back in 1946 to 1956, in those ranges of time, there were some kids about your age that were playing in some caves, not far from where Dennis and Sarah are. They were playing in some caves, and they're called the Qumran caves. The caves of Qumran. Okay? And what did they find inside these caves? Does anybody know?
Scrolls.
some scrolls. They had these big, tall jars, clay jars, and they were filled with scrolls. And not just like 3 scrolls or 4 scrolls, but like hundreds of scrolls. Today we call them the Dead Sea Scrolls because it was on the Dead Sea. Okay? In those scrolls, what we find is some clues to something that we would probably never otherwise know, which help us understand a story like this in the Bible a little more. These scrolls were written by a kind of Jewish person that was living at the time of Jesus and just after the time of Jesus, but during that same time. They were called the Essenes. And what the Essenes did is they wrote things down. In fact, they wrote down manuals for everything. They loved to write things down, and they loved to follow practices and procedures. And in there, they have what they've now chronicled. They've kind of, like sorted and organized. They sorted and they said, the 11th cave, 11, Q of Qumran, the 11th scroll, tells us that in those days, in Jesus' days, in the days in which he was coming across the boat, getting out of the boat and coming into contact with 2 demon-possessed men, the way in which you deal with guys like this is written down on these scrolls. What you do is you get the elders to come, and over a month's time, 30 days, you sit in a oval circle, not a round circle, but an oval circle. It's very prescriptive. And what you do is you read and you exercise. Do you know what it means by exercising a demon? Okay? Getting them buff, right? Lifting weights. Yeah, exercise. No, what do they mean by exercising? Casting out, right? Getting rid of. Just what Jesus did, right? Took them out of one thing, right? He exercised them. He removed them. He got rid of them, right? He transferred them. It talks about, in prescriptive details, about how to get rid of a demon. And so when Jesus, what does Jesus do? He says, oh, I know what we do now. Let's sit in an oval, guys. We got a big boat here. We got the next 30 days planned out for us. Somebody brings some food and water. We're going to be sitting here and we're going to be doing some reading stuff. What does Jesus do? He deals with it by saying a 2-letter word with an exclamation point on the end of it. He says, go, right? And it happens, right? What happens to us when we see things that are outside of our normal, everyday kind of expectation and, right? We can become excited about that and think, wow, this is great, right? But oftentimes we get afraid. You know how many times Jesus in the Gospels talk about don't be afraid? How many times? Do you know what the count is on that? I always find this the most interesting thing. 365 times the Gospels say, don't be afraid. Like one for every day of the year. Not 364, not 366, 365 days, Jesus says, don't be afraid. Right? In the collective 4 Gospel work. Right? Do you think Jesus wants us to be afraid? No. And what do we tend to be? Afraid, right? That's kind of like our basic human nature. Right? Something comes up, we get afraid of it. Right? In fact, we are maybe addicted to being afraid. Hypothesis for another time. Okay. So Jesus deals with this and says, go. Right? This blows their mind. They say, oh my goodness, who is this guy? It's best, we think, if he just is not around us anymore. Right? Maybe thank you very much for getting rid of our problem here. Maybe I'm upset with you because of the pigs, right? But I think mostly what's going on in the story here is they're upset. Let's do some application. What do we think if we hear a story like this with a few Qumran, 11Q11 kinds of, maybe some ideas here that maybe kind of help us illuminate what's going on here? What kind of application do you think that means for us? Like, what does it mean for us at school this week? What does it mean for us, as a church? What does it mean for us in what Dennis and Sarah are doing? What does it mean for us, I don't know, at work, wherever you're doing, in the families you're living, the people who are here? Yeah. You're used to people coming and telling you, this is what it means, this is what you should do, do it. Right? But what do you think it means? Maybe something to do with fear?
Jesus has a situation in hand, we can trust him.
Jesus has a situation in hand, and we can trust him. Even if he does it differently than what we expect him to, even if he deals with the situation differently than what we want him to,
Yeah.
right? Whose job is it to align? Like, is it his job to align with, like, we would really like you to do this, Jesus, but do it A, B, and C? Or is it our job to say, Jesus, do it, deal with this the way you want to. I will align myself with, the way you want to deal with it. We are control freaks sometimes. Much of the time, right? We want Jesus to come and intervene and do things, but we kind of really would like him to do it in our time, in our way, right? With the result that would look the way we would want to do, right? We got to stop that. That's a big problem. What else would you say? That's a great application. Is it too? Have I asked that too abstractly, or is it making sense? Okay, maybe that part is even too abstract to ask.
One person said that
Yeah.
Jesus never made Christians, he made disciples. Disciples are sent.
Right.
So that's the same with that man, he was sent.
Yeah. So Jesus' purposes is always in discipleship making, right? He wanted his own disciples to see this. He wanted the person in whom he relieved, right? Not just to kind of have now a holiday, right? Go take 2 weeks, put your feet up kind of thing. But here's a new mission for you, right? And he's a God who's on a mission, who gives mission, right? Do we like being given tasks to do? Sometimes, right? But if we're going to be following Jesus, it's a guarantee a mission is coming with it. Kids, what do you think? What difference does this story make now that you have a different insight? What did you learn about that you didn't know before? Do you know? Did you learn anything different?
The entire story.
The entire story? Yeah, it's good to remember that.
No, I've never heard that story.
You never heard the story, now you know the story. Well, you can go and read it, okay? It's in Matthew chapter 8, verse 28. Okay, you can go and look there and see if I'm making it all up or not, okay? And if I am, you can contact Ralph and be upset with him. Is Jesus a pretty cool God? Kind of neat the way he deals with things, doesn't he? Right? He's working for everybody's best interest. Right? Does he care about the town? Does he care about the man? Right? Does he care about his disciples? Right? Nobody gets left out. He's like this idea of win-win-win situation. He's looking for everybody, right? So sure, some pigs got sacrificed in the midst of it, and for the animal activists, that might be a trouble, right? But it's not just in vain. It's with a purpose. So we can be, I think, satisfied with that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wanted to say that 2 Corinthians 5, it says that Jesus died for us so that we would no longer live for ourselves, but for he who died for us. And he calls us as ambassadors in verse 20.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder to go out and live as his ambassadors here on earth.
Yeah, so he sends us out as ambassadors, right? What does an ambassador do?
You represent
yeah.
Jesus here on earth.
Right, you represent, right? So I'm going to say, that if we look through the scriptures, as we begin to read through them again, September sometimes is the start of a new year in some ways for us, right? As we're reading our Bibles this year, as we're praying, as we think about, how God sends us, how he sends us to be ambassadors, how he sends us to be his agents, right? Angels, messengers, as he sends us to do these kinds of things, right? The scriptures are littered with this kind of talk, right? And so sometimes the mission of God seems like it's something that is, we did that, in a different time and a different age in the church, right? Mission is expensive, right? What the Piano Roses are doing, right, is not inexpensive. It's not without cost, right? Both cash costs, but also with, I know their kids are having a hard time sometimes in school, right? It's not without personal sacrifice, It's a costly mission. It's not a, click an app on your phone and you're done kind of thing. It's a investment kind of thing. So just to encourage us as we're starting the year, as we're working as a church, as we've been assembled together, right? This is not the end, right? This is the beginning. The beginning is now to kind of go out and make a difference. So do you want to come up, or what's Yeah, okay. Thanks for having me today, and hope that there's something that will make a difference in your life.